slide him inside on that sure passing down on third down, kind of the way that the Seahawks have used Michael Bennett, and he can be an extremely effective weapon. I think a very high floor player who would fit in really well with the 49ers at number 2 or the Bears at number 3.
Well, that's the thing. Just because he's the second best defensive end in the draft doesn't mean he's not the second best player available in the draft.
No doubt.
And this is where we get ourselves into trouble, I think, when we talk about the NFL draft. Is, we pigeonhole guys a little bit. I think that just because he's not the number 1 overall pick, I still think he's a top 5 guy and somebody who will maybe be the most helpful immediate player in the draft.
I mean, if he slides past top 5, I mean, I will say this. There always is that one player for whatever reason. I mean, last year was Laramie Tunsil, and it was obvious. Mm-hmm. But there's always one player that takes a ride south.
Yeah,
And could it be Solomon Thomas? Oh, I mean, it could be, but boy, he could make somebody look stupid.
I mean, he is a safe play at arguably the safest or co-safest position to draft or position in the draft.
But it seems like everybody's trying to be a little risky.
Right.
See if we can't find this.
I don't know if you play it that way with a top 10 pick. Like, I know that this is kind of ridiculous to say, but when I am in a fantasy draft, my general philosophy usually is play it safe with that first round pick and take gambles later. If you look at a lot of these other top guys, let's say Marshawn Lattimore from Ohio State, chronic hamstring problems. Leonard Fournette had some injury issues. He's a running back. He's not necessarily a pass catcher. We know all the quarterbacks have all these issues. Jonathan Allen from Alabama has shoulder problems. Solomon Thomas has none of those issues. Totally clean prospect. Program that has produced a lot of really good players
Stanford,
in recent years.
Yeah.
To me, it's a no-brainer that he goes top 5.
Well, and you know who he reminds me of a little bit, and just in terms of sort of the narrative surrounding the draft, is Leonard Williams. I mean, Leonard Williams 2 years ago could have gone 1.
Yeah, we were talking about droppers. There you go.
He went 6 to the Jets. Now, he hasn't been a star, but he's been darn good. I mean, last year, I think it was 32 tackles in 2016. That was his second year in the league. And this is a guy who I think we were comparing to sort of the other great players, and he slipped to 6, and that was a safe, solid, really good pick by the New York Jets. And that's a franchise that doesn't make a lot of great early round draft selections.
We just talked about Mark Sanchez in the last hour.
Yes.
That's correct. Is there, and I'll start with you, Michael, is there a Pac-12 player that intrigues you more than others, whether it's because of the skill or because of the intangibles or the system? I mean, is there one player that you look at and you go, wow?
Well, I mean, I think Christian McCaffrey is going to be a star in this league. We touched on it earlier, the versatile skill set that he has. Mm-hmm. You know, he can play running back, he can play receiver, he can also be a kick returner. But, sort of in a similar vein, I'll go back to the USC well. I used to cover this player and know him fairly well, and that's Adoree Jackson. Adoree is an extremely talented and natural athlete who I think is still pretty raw as a cornerback and therefore has a lot of room to grow. During his college career, he divided his time not only between offense and defense, but between football and track.
Right.
I think
was successfully so.
Very successfully so. He's a long jump champion in the Pac-12, and he aspired to participate in the Olympics, and I think he got an entire spring off in order to do that. I think now he's going to have an opportunity to focus on all the little things that it takes, the technique stuff that it takes to become a really proficient corner. And even if that doesn't happen right away, to me, he can be your third corner right away, and he can also be your top return guy. He's excellent with the ball in his hands. I think he's a guy who has a really high upside, and he's not even close to reaching it at this point.
For me, that player is John Ross.
Yeah.
And we go off measurables, and obviously the 40-yard dash, depending on who you are, it's either the most important thing or a completely irrelevant number when it comes to preparing for the NFL draft. But if you look at John Ross's statistics, I mean, he has not been a sure thing as a college player. 2 years ago, it's 17 catches. His freshman year, 16 catches. He missed all of his junior season. And even last year, even as Washington was going good, 28 receiving yards in the college football semifinal, the 51 in a win over Colorado. I mean, this is not a guy who's been necessarily a difference maker. I mean, he had 208 receiving yards against Cal, but Zach, me and you could have like 94 receiving yards against Cal. Cal's defense was not very good last year, and yet he drips with potential. And he's a guy who, if you squint a little bit, I mean, I really like him going to the Baltimore Ravens. I think that he fits kind of a Mike Wallace role with them, somebody who can stretch the field vertically. There aren't a lot of guys with that speed in this draft.
I was going to say nobody wants to be Mike Williams.
I mean, he could be,
That's a bad word.
but it's intriguing to me. I mean, he could be Darius Hayward Bay level bust, right?
Well, but I mean, in fairness to Darius Hayward Bay, if he should never have been taken 8th or 9th or whatever it was, and he ended up being. But yeah,
but he like Ross had just a fantastic combine, really great measurables, and somebody, Al Davis, shockingly, took a flyer on him because he was fast. I mean, he could. You ask me who I am intrigued by. It's John Ross. It's a guy who was never a great college receiver, who may be the first receiver taken in this draft.
Well, and see, I kind of went in a different direction because you talk about the interesting guys, and sure, McCaffrey, Thomas, Ross. But, I look down the list a little bit more. A guy like Davis Webb, right?
Okay.
I mean, because is somebody going to find value in him earlier or later or not at all? I mean, I'm not suggesting he won't get drafted. I'm pretty sure that he will. But is he somebody that, in the past, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and we'll talk more about it later. The Arizona Cardinals have tried to find that fit at quarterback in the 4th, 5th round, maybe even a little bit later with a guy like Logan Thomas. Can you get something like that out of a kid like Davis Webb and not be a Dak Prescott, but come in and be effective? I don't know, and I'm curious to see where he goes. It matters where he goes, obviously.
Well, he gets hit with the system quarterback thing too, and I
We're
think
all
maybe
system quarterbacks.
Yeah, but I think nobody suffers more from Jared Goff being just a disaster this year than Davis Webb, the guy who took over for him at Cal. You look at sort of the Sonny system, hasn't produced a lot of guys. Patrick Mahomes runs the same system. Certainly, you could say a lot of the same things about him being a system guy that you could about Webb, but Mahomes at least has that arm strength,
but the
a
Rams,
little bit of an athletic pedigree. I don't know. I mean, I think Webb's a late pick to a place like the Cardinals if the Cardinals decide to go with immediate help in the first round as opposed to somebody like Mahomes.
How about another one? One that you couldn't hear enough about a couple of years ago, Eddie Vanderdoes.
Ooh,
Mountain of a man.
John Gold's buddy, Eddie Vanderdoes.
Right. And a couple of years ago when we were talking about talented defensive linemen, the Pac-12 had about a dozen of them, and he was one of them. Since then, what's happened? And maybe, Michael, that's a little bit better for you.
Keeps getting hurt.
He was injury issues. I think there are questions about his toughness. There have been a lot of guys at UCLA who were kind of overhyped and didn't pan out. I mean, maybe to a slightly lesser extent than USC. I think it just kind of happens with the two LA schools. They get the 4- and 5-star prospects. These guys always come in, with all this hype, and then, a lot of them don't end up living up to it. I mean, if you had told someone, 3 or 4 years ago that Eddie Vanderdoes was going to be, the 3rd or 4th best UCLA prospect, just on the defensive side alone in this draft, no one would have ever thought that, but Tack McKinley most certainly is going to go ahead of him, probably at the end of the first round or early second. Fabian Moreau co'd be as high as a second-round pick. Jayon Brown is another guy who's probably going to get drafted. I don't know what happens to an Eddie Vanderdoes. 6'3", 305 pound. Let's face it, relatively speaking, underachiever.
Looks good getting off the bus, right? That's what coaches say about guys like that. Let him get off first.
Arizona's got a guy like that.
They do.
We haven't mentioned him
Freddie
yet.
Tagaloa. Does anybody look better getting off a bus than him?
No, and he's a big guy.
The bus, it moves a little bit.
Well, here's the thing: if you're taking a flyer, and that's what rounds 5, 6, and 7, or you're just picking guys, right? I mean, it's a let's hope he makes the team.
NBA draft.
Yeah,
Fran Fraschillo's like, I don't know who that is.
Yes,
I don't know who that
he
is.
He plays in Spain. Yes,
yeah. Sure.
Freddie Tagaloa is he plays in Spain, and we have low definition video highlights of him, kind of a player. Where I don't think he'll be drafted. I don't. But you could do a lot worse looking at measurables than what Freddie Tagaloa brings. Big, strong guy. Clearly has been injury prone. If you are convinced that the only problem with Freddie Tagaloa is that he has been hurt too much, then I think you take a flyer. If you read into the fact that he left a pretty bad Cal team because he couldn't play there and really couldn't crack an Arizona lineup. And if you say, well, that means that there's a lack of toughness or skill or something there, certainly you don't touch him with a 10-foot pole. The question is, will some scout, and you know that there's a scout somewhere, Michael Lev, that will look at the things he brings and go, yeah, might be worth bringing him in.
Wait, as a free agent,
that-
he's not going to be drafted.
Is that scout the woman or man that meets their significant other and says, I can change them. I can change them. 2 years later, they're divorced. Can't change them.
That might be the case. I mean, Freddie Tagaloa had every opportunity to succeed
At both places.
At both Cal and Arizona. Injuries, not necessarily his fault. That stuff happens. But another guy who you'd have to say, based on the size and the athletic ability that he had, who was unfortunately an underachiever during his career at Arizona. He could have, if he had really gotten it together, he could have maybe made a difference for that team and that offense.
And for himself.
Is there that much of a difference, though, in terms of the narrative between Eddie Vanderdoes and Freddie Tagaloa? It seems as if we were giving Eddie Vanderdoes the benefit of the doubt when he has been sort of just as hamstrung by injuries and underachievement as Freddie Tagaloa.
I mean, I'm looking at NFL.com's profile of Eddie Vanderdoes, and they project him as a 3rd or 4th round pick. So I think the difference is that this is a legitimate draft prospect, and Freddie Tagaloa is a fringe one.
Right, but the narrative is the same with both. It just got hurt, didn't live up to expectations.
But my red flag is that for if we're talking about the difference, Vanderdoes, that happened at UCLA, where he couldn't play at Arizona, and now you're going to play for me? See ya.
I agree.
Books by the cover, man.
I feel like the USC or UCLA guy will be given the benefit of the doubt in that situation if you're
his
comparing the
program
two
earns
guys.
it.
Yes.
Only because of the program, though. That doesn't look, as my mom would say, is that fair? No. Is life fair? Also no. And so that's just one of those things where maybe Freddie should have gone to UCLA and he'd have been drafted.
Truth bomb from Mrs. Clark. I like it.
Truth bomb. I was raised in the middle of a truth bomb mushroom cloud. So it's one of those things you pick up along the way. More NFL draft is next year on ESPN Tucson 1490 and 104.9 FM. ESPN Tucson 1490 and 104.9 FM. My girl, MC. Yes. Stacey, why you got to hit on Mariah Carey so much? And I'm talking about, like, not the last 10 years Mariah Carey.
I never thought she was that great.
Oh, my God. At what? Being attractive or singing? Because I was, as a kid,
Stacey's wrong on this one. Sorry.
Yeah,
Like, make it happen.
All right.
How do you not
You guys
make
realize
it
I
happen?
control all of your mics, right?
Only for today. I'll be back in that seat tomorrow. Keep that in mind. That's my seat. Yeah, I love Mariah Carey. I can't. Fantasy,
Okay.
one of my favorite albums of all time. I don't care what that says about me because
Do you remember her first album, which I think was just called Mariah
I
or
don't.
something?
Well, I mean,
Make It Happen, as good a song 1991 as there was.
but see, that's the thing. Like,
Something of Love.
Right, but that's the thing. I didn't,
Vision of Love.
There we go. Thank you, Vision of Love.
I didn't pick up on any of that until the second or third album because I wasn't born until 1985. So I kind of came in at the. And my parents are not Mariah Carey fans, so I wasn't getting it from them, and I'm the oldest child. So.
I'm guessing a lot of Motown in the Zach
Well,
Clark house.
Yeah, from my mother, but my dad, what you would now call classic rock.
Nice.
And old school country, like Willie and Johnny, and so I was
Jennings. And
Yeah. And then, of course, because my dad is old and boring, that's where I get my love of NPR and classical music from him as well. So I'm all over the place.
I like this. I like this Clark family. I want to know more about them.
Oh, God. You didn't get enough last Saturday? Good Lord. You've seen plenty. When we look at some more of these, we're continuing our conversation from some of these Pac-12 players. We talked about the lack of for Arizona, but if you look at the Pac-12 as a whole, what do you think this draft says about the conference as it is like right now? I think it's pretty strong as a draft.
Yeah, I think very strong. It's interesting that Stanford has the best guys. And in the chart that I was talking about earlier, Stanford, the most draft picks in the last 5 years leading up to this, which, again, is something that no one ever would have conceived of 10, 12 years ago. But Jim Harbaugh really kind of changed the culture of that program. And
David Shaw's kept it.
And David Shaw has kept it. And what's interesting about Stanford is that, they have very specific and narrow group of guys that they look at in recruiting. You have to have a certain academic
you have to.
resume in order to get into Stanford, and they hit on an amazingly high percentage of those guys. It's really pretty remarkable.
Easy breezy, right? You talk about Andrew Luck, and this is a guy that was completing an advanced architecture degree while taking Stanford to the Rose Bowl. I can do one of those things at a single time.
To me, what this signals, Zach, is the continued evolution of who the powers are.
Right,
in the
because
Pac-12.
where's Oregon? Oregon?
Where's Oregon? Washington is everywhere, like they've been the last 2 years.
Arizona State's non-existent.
The two Arizona schools, Arizona and Arizona State,
The whole
could have one total player drafted, and that one total player will be a kicker. If I'm betting,
good kicker though.
Yeah. If I'm betting on one player from those schools to get drafted, it's Zane Gonzalez, the kicker. He's very good, but he's a kicker.
I've got this rule about that.
Don't draft him in the second round.
Don't draft. Just don't.
I'm with you on that.
It's
one,
like a
Zach.
fantasy
100%.
football strategy.
They grow on a
you guys.
farm. Just go pick one.
To me, that's what's interesting, though, is, Oregon is practically non-existent. Cal, practically non-existent. Both Arizona schools. Utah's got a couple linemen, but that's really it. Colorado's not.
Don't underestimate Marcus Williams, the safety from Utah. I saw him sneak into the back end of a mock draft earlier today. That's a player I like a lot, too. He can be that kind of center fielder type guy. Obviously not getting as much hype as Malik Hooker of Ohio State, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, but I think Marcus Williams is going to be a second rounder and will have a long and productive NFL career.
Then you have Oregon State and Washington State, and they've been the Washington State has done. They've had some guys, and you look at maybe a Gabe Marks later this year, but yeah, I think what it does show to me, and this is a conversation that happens outside of sports, is like there's no middle class.
No.
There's no middle class right now in the Conference of Champions. There's the 1%ers, and then there's those of us that struggle to put food on the table. I don't want to be too dramatic, but it feels like there's a huge gap in the middle is cavernous.
But let's look at this a little bit differently. Is it possible that, again, because we've talked about this, Stacey and I talked about this the previous couple of days, the NFL draft decisions are made increasingly by people who are scared to death of being second-guessed or losing their jobs.
Totally.
Okay. it is so much safer to pick a USC guy than a Washington State guy, even if on paper maybe you like the Washington State guy a little bit better, or on film. Is it possible that there is this sort of lack of a middle class, in part because nobody is willing to take a chance on a guy from not a brand name school?
And why is that?
I don't know, but are you telling me that Gabe Marks, Michael Lev saw Gabe Marks in Washington State score like 100 points in Pullman this year. Gabe Marks is a very good example. He is not going to get the benefit of the doubt, even though I think he may have been the best, most reliable receiver in the Pac-12. Somebody like John Ross, who measured better, obviously, but was not nearly as productive a player as Gabe Marks, could be the first wide receiver taken. To me, I just think that's a little bit of a strange dichotomy, and I don't know.
Is it though? I mean, think about it. You go to the grocery store. Are you going to buy corn flakes, or are you going to buy flakes of corn? Nobody wants flakes of corn. Don't give me the generic. I want corn flakes. Where's the rooster?
But if we're talking value, and that's what this is all about.
Don't mess with my cereal.
It's not about the best. But okay. Well, but in the first round, possibly, yes. But in the fifth round, I mean, if you've got 90 cents to spend.
Oh, yeah. No.
I mean, you're buying flakes of corn because that's better than starving.
Yes.
I've taken this analogy way too
There's
far.
probably also a little bit of a bias against Washington State and that offense, just in the same way that you were talking about Davis
System.
Webb earlier.
System.
Maybe Gabe Marks is getting open only because they run 5 wide every single time,
Every
and
play.
he's just, there's just all these
Will that hurt Luke
these
Falk?
avenues that are open. Of course, I'm also totally skewed on this subject because everyone was open for that entire game against Arizona,
I'm still
and there
open.
was no pass rush pressure. I still don't know what happened that day.
Wait, very quickly, we talk about Washington State and the perceived notion. What about a guy like Luke Falk when it comes time for? Because boy, he seems like a really smart kid. Great arm. Is he going to be punished for that, like other guys have been that played at Texas Tech? Maybe.
How many millions of dollars is Jared Goff costing Luke Falk? Had Jared Goff come into the league last year, taken over the starting job, and been like Carson Wentz
Did he
level
pee in the
serviceable?
top of the, you're saying like he peed in the top of the toilet, so every time you flush, pee comes out? I mean, that's-
Unfortunately, I think that he is ruining it for people
upper
in the
decker?
air raid system.
There's still time for Jared Goff, Ryan. Don't give up on him.
yeah, I mean,
And Patrick Mahomes, same thing this year. If Patrick Mahomes comes out and is a player next year, maybe people will consider guys in that air raid system.
drink.
Have you seen Patrick Mahomes, any of those types of throws? There's no one on planet Earth, short of maybe Aaron Rodgers, who can make some of the throws.
I know.
That Mahomes can make, like running to his left, his body completely open,
And
throwing
then just
across his body, throwing 40 yards down the field while on the dead run. He's an amazing prospect, but he's raw. It's going to take a little time.
And I love Patrick Mahomes.
Well, and the Cardinals
player.
may love him too. We'll find out a little bit later. At this time of the show, we're going to say goodbye to Michael Lev. Michael, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to your story tomorrow morning. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Zach. So much fun.
Oh, I'm glad you had a good time. We're back with Ryan and Stacy next in ESPN Tucson 1490 and 104.9 FM.
Yeah, Mrs. Jones.
But what I'm trying to remember is from what movie was this, where the main character sang this song? Not that old, I don't think. I won't remember it. That's Me and Mrs. Jones here on Throwback Thursday, ESPN Tucson 1490 and 105 FM. We want to thank Michael Lev for his time. Always appreciate speaking with him. And remember, the NFL draft itself begins about 5 o'clock. First pick will roll in. And we're not going to switch to national coverage, but what Stacey will do is he will roll the picks out live when you hear this sound. So, and then we will flip over to national coverage at 6 o'clock. So everything will continue with the national guys, Bill Point and the crew at 6. We're going to keep you here through then, but you won't miss any picks while we do it. So
It's possible that Me and Mrs. Jones was used in Bridget Jones's Diary, by the way. Is that possible?
you'd think it would be, right? I mean, just from – but I don't think I've seen that movie.
I would hope that you
Really?
haven't seen that movie.
Nah.
I don't know.
How would you know that?
I don't know. I know things.
Wait, are you telling me it was or are you asking me? I don't –
I'm telling you it was. It was Bridget Jones's Diary.
well, that's not the movie I was thinking.
Okay. Beautiful Girls. Then I'm done. Wikipedia is my friend.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sure it is. All right. What about the rest of us? All right. So we've been kind of dancing around this topic for a while there, Rhino, as we look ahead to the Arizona Cardinals and what they may do. You know, and there are options for the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think they have as many as others think they do, unless you think you can get a quarterback later. Because I think no matter what you do, Ryan, I think you got to take one. You've put yourself in a spot whether you want to or not. I just think you've got to.
You've put it off and you've put it off and you've put
Right.
it off. And at some point now you got to draft a
It's
guy.
the night before the exam. You got to study now.
Right, but here's the problem. You've brought back the greatest player in the history of your franchise, Larry Fitzgerald, for one more day in the sun, right? You brought him back. You've convinced Carson Palmer that if he comes back, they're going to have a real chance to do something. To me, there are implicit promises when you do that you're going to try to make them better immediately to try to get them that Super Bowl ring before they retire.
So what you're saying is because whatever they said to bring back Fitzgerald, to bring back Palmer, that they've got to make good on said promises.
I think if you're picking 13th overall, and if there is a guy who can help your offense
Corey
immediately,
Davis.
there's going to be a real push to take that guy. Do I think they should? No. I think they should draft a quarterback. But I think that there is something to be said for going for it. And I think that the Cardinals right now are going for it. And Bruce Arians in his offense, with the skill set that Carson Palmer has, Larry Fitzgerald back, I mean, is O.J. Howard still there at 13? If he is, maybe you take him. I mean, the Cardinals don't have a tight end.
They have all the tight ends. They've got like 8 of them on their roster.
But no good ones. I mean, no sort of franchise-changing ones. To me, that's sort of the big question, is have they made promises, implicit or explicit, that means that they're going to have to take somebody that's going to play right away? If they have, I mean, there's some choices there. We talked about John Ross in the last segment too. He'd be there. He strikes me as somebody that would fit really well in their very vertical system. He's a guy blazing speed. If that's the case, Watson and Mahomes, I think are two really interesting options there.
But you can't. Will you be able to get one of them in the second round?
No.
And I don't think so either. And so that puts you in a difficult spot. Now you could say, okay, and we talked about this earlier with the Browns, right? We talked about this where they can take whoever they want, and if they want to address the quarterback next year, they're probably going to be close to the front of the line, if not at the front of the line, to do so.
Right.
The Cardinals are unlikely. Now I know last year was disappointing. I don't think they're going to repeat that performance. So let's say that they wait until next year to draft a quarterback, but now you're at the back of the line.
They're
or
picking,
close to it.
They're picking 24th or 27th.
And those guys that we've talked about that next year will be there, whether you're Darnold or Rosen or whatever, those guys will not be there where the Cardinals likely will be next year. I don't think.
Right.
So now you're playing chess.
Right. I sort of pitched this idea to Erica Weston yesterday, and she laughed at me and continued laughing at me through the break.
Still laughing.
Probably. What if you go out and just get the best wide receiver, best tight end available if you're the Cardinals in the first round now, and you hedge Carson Palmer's inevitable injury, right? Because Carson Palmer is going to get hurt at some point this year, by going out and signing Jay Cutler.
Right.
Go get a guy in Cutler who, for all the bad things people say about him, he has an arm that is in the same category as Carson Palmer's.
Yeah, but he's
Ben
like
Roethlisberger's.
not coachable. There's something about him that he just.
But if he's your backup quarterback, if he is holding a clipboard unless he is needed, that to me protects a little bit against the problem you'd be in if you don't draft a quarterback. I mean, because who's the Cardinals' backup quarterback right now?
Is it
Drew Stanton?
They still have Stanton, yeah, I believe so.
All right, Drew Stanton. I mean,
And they don't have a third quarterback.
Right. To me, that could be an interesting way to hedge things here. Is maybe you draft sort of the best available skill position guy, give Carson Palmer that extra weapon in what will likely be, I think, his final year with the Cardinals.
No question about that.
You know, Larry Fitzgerald in what will likely be his final year with the Arizona Cardinals.
No doubt.
Give them that. That is your vote of confidence. That is your guys, we're taking care of you. So maybe you go get a John Ross. And then maybe very quietly 3 weeks from now, you sign Jay Cutler.
As if you could sign Jay Cutler quietly.
Yeah, I know. You sign Jay Cutler, you give him a clipboard, and you say, you are here if Carson gets hurt. And if Carson gets hurt, Jay Cutler has the arm strength, and I believe it's somebody like Jay Cutler, he can still make all the throws. Can he make all the right decisions? Who knows?
Or does he want to make
Does he want to make all the right decisions?
I think that's the better question.
Right. I mean,
what does he want to do?
He's married to a reality star. They have 2 young kids. He's on the beach with his pants off, as we've seen here in the last couple of weeks. Maybe he doesn't want to play football. But if he does, he could do much worse.
I don't want to him either. Good Lord.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, if he does want to play football, he could do much worse than holding a clipboard in a warm weather city until he is needed. And when he is needed, I think that offense is something that would really play to his biggest strength, which is that rocket arm.
Right. Do you think that if you're Jay Cutler, is that what you see for yourself? I don't know. I can't imagine.
I think Jay Cutler thinks he should be starting somewhere. And I think, and maybe something will happen. I mean, maybe Teddy Bridgewater's injury happens again to somebody else in training camp, and all of a sudden there is a market for Jay Cutler. Entirely possible. I can't see that developing right now, but if the Cardinals are going for it, and again, everything we've seen, I mean, they're talking about re-signing Darrell Washington or allowing Darrell Washington to come back.
Stupid.
No, I know. But they're willing to look past major transgressions here
years.
Because he makes them better today.
They think.
If the Cardinals' goal is they're going for it because they need to be a playoff team and a Super Bowl team this year, and that window will be shut a year from today because Carson Palmer will be gone and Larry Fitz will be gone.
Well, I'll tell you this. Here's what happens with those two guys. If they don't win a Super Bowl this year, they both just figure it's not happening.
And if they do win a Super Bowl this year, they both going out on top. Good night, everybody.
So they're gone either way.
That's
how I see it.
And so and to me, everything that the Cardinals have done in the offseason leads me to believe that they're going for it. And if that's the case, I'm not sure you can draft a quarterback in the first round, even though you should.
Take maybe a Corey Davis,
John Ross.
John Ross. So what I'm hearing right now, going a little off topic, but I want to not break it, but repeat it. Adam Schefter is reporting the Bears are shopping the 3rd pick.
That's not surprising to me.
It's not?
It's not surprising. I think that
the Bears have a lot of needs as well.
The Bears have a lot of needs. The Bears are not a very good football team. And they have so many holes, particularly on defense. I think that, okay, if you could go ahead and get the Ohio State safety, Malik Hooker. If you get him at 3, could you get his sort of 90% equivalent at 16?
Or at 15 or at 12 or at anywhere in between there?
Right.
Yeah, why not?
And the Bears may be dangling that pick to a team that needs a quarterback too. In theory, at 3, you could have your pick of all the quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine the Niners take a quarterback. I mean, they could. The Browns have basically said we're not doing that. I mean, the Niners front office is new, and I mean new.
Like no experience in the sport? Yes.
Well, at least in being
in the front office, yeah.
Right, yeah. John Lynch has
they're a mess. Come on, Zach.
No, I know. And so my point in calling them a mess is not just to be mean, and I don't care if it is or not. It's that I don't know what they will do because they have no track record.
There is no track record whatsoever. To me, though, that's really interesting. So if you're the Bears, let's say, what are you asking for to move down 10 spots?
You're probably looking for somebody in near the top 15 to give you that? And then do you ask for? It depends on how valuable you think the pick that you have is. Do you ask for a fourth rounder with that?
I mean, I would say a 1 and a 2 or a 1 and a 3.
Yeah, I didn't know if I thought 1 and a 2 as well, but you don't want to. You don't want to price everybody out. And I don't know what. Again, we'll have to ask. The real question, Ryan, is who are they entertaining?
Right.
Because then you look at what I mean. What if it's and I mean it wouldn't be, but a team like Cleveland that has multiple, but it could be Cleveland, right? Do you ship your 12 if you think that you need? So what I'm saying is, if you have equity like a team like Cleveland, or if we're going to the NBA like the Sixers have had for years,
right,
move some picks around to make more picks.
Well, and here's the thing too: if the Cleveland Browns have shown us anything, and they've done a lot of things wrong, don't get me wrong when it comes to this, but there's something really smart, and it's a baseball approach, and that's why they have Paul DePodesta in their front office now, former GM of the Dodgers. They're going quantity over quality in terms of picks, right? Yep. They had how many selections last year? They have how many more this year?
They've had the answer is a bunch.
In terms of safety, if you are guarding against the bust that will set your franchise back for 10 years, it's better to have just a bunch of dudes, and sort of natural selection among those guys means that two will never play a meaningful snap for you, but maybe 2 will start for 5 years.
Which is fine. You'll gladly discard the 2 if it brings you something else.
And if you're a terrible football team, as the Browns are, there are holes to fill by drafting 9 guys in 7 rounds.
And there's opportunity.
There's an opportunity there. And so I could see the Bears really kind of going that route. And maybe you trade down, and then maybe you trade down from 3 to 16. And maybe at 16, you don't really like what you see
so
there
you trade
either.
Again.
Trade down from 16 to 28, and maybe you get a 1, a 2, and a 3 out of it, or whatever it would be.
Whatever.
To me, that would make some sense. My source who pays attention to the Bears says that it would be to a team that wants a quarterback.
Sure.
Now, that says absolutely nothing more than what I said to you 5 minutes ago, but curious to see who that might be. Again, San Francisco 49ers, 2, I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. They signed Brian Hoyer during the offseason.
Look who's behind them. Could it be Buffalo? Because, I mean, it's not going to be Cincinnati.
Nope.
Right? It's not going to be Carolina.
Nope.
I don't think it's going to be the Chargers. They've already done that.
Nope.
It's not going to be the Browns because they have an opportunity to do that ahead of time. It's not going to be Tennessee, right? These are all guys that are right in that area. All of those guys have quarterbacks. It's not going to be Jacksonville, I don't think.
Here's something, and I'm just throwing this out there. What about the Redskins at 17? The Redskins have a quarterback desperately.
Oh, we're talking. Could it be Denver that is in this conversation right now? Seems unlikely. They don't gamble much.
No. And to draft a quarterback high, I mean, they drafted the Memphis kid in the first round last year, right? Jordan Lynch.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
And so, maybe not 2 years in a row, but, do you look at something like that? Do you look at...
I forgot about Paxton Lynch.
I know. Did I call him Jordan Lynch? Paxton Lynch? It's Paxton Lynch, isn't it? Yeah,
I don't know.
I called him Jordan Lynch. I'm sorry.
Who's that?
He's the old Northern Illinois guy, the quarterback who was a Heisman Trophy candidate, and he's now like a practice squad tight end somewhere.
Awesome.
Anyway, sorry. To me, that makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, maybe the Redskins are shopping Kirk Cousins, and then they could trade up and get their quarterback. Their coach is Jay Gruden, who is a quarterback whisperer. And you know what? You shed $30 million off the payroll. Maybe you get a couple picks out of him. That would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so I'll be very curious to see now what happens early on, and that's why we do this. That's why we roll the picks. More of the Zach Clark Show coming up next here on ESPN Tucson 1490 and 104.9 FM.
may qualify, maybe. But Beyonce's only been Beyonce for like, what, a decade?
I don't even think, yeah, I can't think about it much more than that. But as always, Throwback Thursday, 106.3 The Groove. Every once in a while, these songs catch you by surprise.
That's from 2003.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Wow, that song's almost 15 years old. Way older than I thought it
We
was.
are old men.
That's crazy.
It's terrible.
Crazy. So we're going to get to the 5 o'clock hour here in just minutes, where we're going to start rolling picks out live as they come from Philadelphia, the steps where Rocky Balboa made his famous run, which I believe is also the Philadelphia Library, which nobody ever mentions. Because who cares? We love pop culture. I want to come back to the Cardinals for a second, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of dovetailed onto the Bears, which was fine. But what I want to point out with the Cardinals, and I know that this is a relatively obvious statement because they all are so important, but Ryan, this is a huge draft for the Arizona Cardinals. Mm-hmm. I know that they've got this window open, and that window is not going to stay open much longer in its current form. If they want to keep this good ride running, they have got to start to backfill some of those guys they're going to lose here in the next year or two, and they've got to do it properly.
Right. I mean, David Johnson, this is what makes the Cardinals so compelling of a team.
Him.
David Johnson, maybe the best running back in football, and he's like 26. This team can continue to be really good, provided they restock at positions like quarterback, and we talked about that in the last segment. I think at receiver, drafting a receiver with your first-round pick, I think would not only give the team a valuable weapon this year in what will likely be Larry Fitzgerald and Carson Palmer's final year, but it gives you that heir apparent to Larry Fitz when he does decide to retire. I think that's a good way to go. Defensively, they're a team that is really, rock solid. I think from the defensive backfield forward, obviously everybody could use an extra linebacker or two, maybe a playmaking rusher, but you've got Patrick Peterson, you've got the Honey Badger.
You do.
This is a team that from that standpoint should not have to worry too much. Their kicking game, and I'm being glib here a little bit, but if you could draft a kicker in the 5th round, and if he could be your starting kicker for 10 years, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, because they cut Catman, who they drafted 3 years ago. Catanzaro.
Yeah, and maybe a good team might be able to get away with a 6th round selection of a kicker if it's a guy who they really like. But as you said earlier today, sometimes the best strategy is just signing a dude off the street.
Well, you talked about Jared Goff ruining things for other quarterbacks from places like Cal. Did Robert Aguayo do that for every other kicker out there?
Yeah.
They took him in the 2nd round and he missed like his first 6 or 7 he couldn't hit.
And then after his rookie season, they showed a ton of confidence in him by signing Nick Folk to come in and take his job.
Former Arizona Wildcat.
Yeah, still in the league.
After what, over a decade now? He's been around for a long time.
I'd say 14 years, something like that.
He was with Dallas, he was with New York, and I remember as a rookie when he made that, he made 2 field goals in a row of over 50 yards on Monday Night Football for Dallas. But with the Cardinals, this is a pivotal moment in their franchise. They're either going to continue to be strong moving forward, a viable product, or they could, and I'm not saying they will, but they could run the risk of returning to where they came, the middle of the desert out of nowhere.
Well, and that, to me, is what makes this such a compelling draft for them. The worst case scenario here is this, is they draft for today, passing on the quarterback of the future.
Right.
They're terrible this year or mediocre. David Johnson, who is already, the window for a running back to be truly dominant in the NFL is like 3 years, 4 years. That window is already closing for David Johnson. And you could look up in, say, 3 more years and have no quarterback, a running back who's either overpaid or out of the league, no quality receivers to speak of. Then you'd have Patrick Peterson and the Honey Badger making a lot of money, occupying a lot of cap space. And you're just kind of stuck in the middle.
Right.
However, if it works, and I think that they're going for it, if it works and they go get somebody right now who can help them offensively immediately, maybe they're a dark horse Super Bowl contender.
Well, and I think that's you bring up an interesting point that what they do, and this is true of most teams, so a lot of times we know the Patriots are going for it. We know that. They always do because they have good players, they have a good franchise. Mm-hmm. The Browns, they're not going for it. They have to reassemble. But a team like the Cardinals, you're in this spot. What they do tonight in the next 90 minutes is likely going to tell us what their thought process is. Because I agree with you, Ryan. If they take a playmaker that's not a quarterback, they think they can win right here, right now with everything else that they have.
Absolutely.
If they take the quarterback, maybe you don't feel as confident about that. Not that it would be a bad pick, but I think to Ryan's point, the message that it would send to Fitz, Palmer may not be exactly what you want.
Exactly. This is a franchise, I think, that is never going to get by on tradition. This is not a very desirable place to sign if you're a free agent. You need to grow your own players, but you also need to take advantage of the windows you have to compete. That window is closing this year. Now's the time to go get it.
Which kills me. No athletes seem to want to come to play in Phoenix, but they all want to retire here. Everybody wants to retire in Scottsdale. I totally can see why. All right, 5 o'clock hour coming up. Picks live as they happen right here on ESPN Tucson 1490 and 104.9 FM.